Ladies and gentlemen, we're waiting on the copies. We've got 2 compensation resolutions on the way up, and they're hot off the press along with the tracking sheet. So if you'll just stand at ease for just a minute, we'll get started as soon as they get in the door. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Aren't you sweet?
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll call this meeting to order. If we can get your attention. If we can get your attention, please, we'll call the meeting to order. And I'm going to ask Chairman Jay Neal if he would do an invocation for us.
Your leadership and guidance in our lives. We are a blessed people. We realize that. Your provisions that you provide exceed our expectations, and we're so thankful for your provisions. And Lord, as we're continuing to do the work of this state, we pray that you would continue to give us wisdom and guidance. And Lord, that the decisions we make would be inspired and guided by you for the betterment of all Georgia. And we'll give you the praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask the staff if they would to go ahead and start handing out the budget documents so everybody will have those. We're going to move ahead. We have two. Can I get your attention, please? We've got two compensation resolutions we need to hear in the committee this afternoon, and I'm going to ask Representative Buckner if she would come forward on H.R. 1161. What you have in front of you is a committee sub for this, so I'm going to allow her to present it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I've never done this, so I'll just tell you the story and the amount, and hopefully that'll be what you need to make your decision. But Mr. Cawley is actually a resident of Ellaville, Georgia. He accompanied his son to the Department of Labor office on July the 14th. Oh, thank y'all. And when he was waiting, he is an unemployed veteran who already has a back injury. He had a seat in a new chair that the Department of Labor had just put out in the waiting room that had rollers on it, and it rolled out from under him, and he hit the floor and injured his back and neck. The Department of Labor folks wanted him to be transported by ambulance to the hospital. He asked for his wife to drive him, and all he's asking for at this point is to cover the ambulance fee, the hospital fee, and his medical bills, and that comes to around $7,500, which is what the compensation resolution is for. And we have copies of all the bills that are certified that they did actually incur those expenses. After his accident, the Department of Labor removed the chairs from the lobby, returned them to the manufacturer, and they said that those chairs were never supposed to have had rollers on them, and they have replaced them with different chairs.
Okay, the members of the committee, both of these resolutions we're looking at have gone through the commission that looks into each one and have been certified. There were actually 3 that were filed. These are the only 2 that met the criteria. So just to let you know that, I think first question is Chairman Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Buckner, on this claim, does the Department of Labor not have insurance on the facility down there that would cover accidents?
I honestly do not
Liability?
know and cannot answer that. All I know is that Mr. Cawley said that the director at the Department of Labor there told him that he could go through this process.
Thank you.
Representative Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Buckner, is it not true that to the extent that the Department of Labor does not have liability coverage, the state enjoys sovereign immunity from these claims?
I don't know the answer to that, but I know this gentleman is not employed. He does not have the money to pay the medical bills. He was carried in an ambulance from that site to the hospital and asked not to be. So there's been an expense incurred by him that he didn't ask for.
Mr. Chairman, if I could pose this to the chair, isn't it true that the state of Georgia has sovereign immunity for these claims to the extent we do not have liability insurance coverage?
We do have sovereign immunity on some items. However, there are certain instances where we do have to do resolutions such as this to pay for vehicle damages through DOT and several other instances that are not covered by insurance.
If I could pose one more question to Representative Buckner. Isn't it true that this matter has not been adjudicated by a jury of Mr. Cawley's peers, wherein he would be either awarded a judgment or awarded a...
Yes, sir, that's true, because he says he can't afford an attorney and that he would prefer just to get his money for the bills that he's incurred for his injury. That's all he wants.
Okay, Chairman Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, I want to direct this to Vice Chair Reinders, who handles DOAS, Department of Administrative Services. Chairman Reinders, did DOAS Risk Management bring this to you as far as any reserves set up under our self-insuring funding for liability?
Not to the best of my recollection.
Okay. Did you ask?
Not to the best of my recollection.
Didn't this compensation resolution come out of general government?
It did not.
Okay.
No, due to time, we had to fast forward because we didn't get this until late last week.
Mr. Chairman, there's nothing set up in reserve from the Department of Administrative Services for this particular accident?
Nothing I'm aware of. No, sir.
You want me to call them and ask them?
We can.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Hartman. Man.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Buckner, quick, right here, Ms. Buckner, in the back.
Sorry.
Quick question on this. You said that the manufacturer has stated that the wheels weren't supposed to be on this chair. Who put the wheels on the chair?
I don't know if they came installed or if they were installed by Department of Labor.
Does Mr. Cawley intend to pursue this through any court action after we? I know you stated that he does not have the money.
He said that he had been told that he could, but all he wants is to pay his medical bills, is what he keeps telling me.
Is there something we could do to amend this to ensure that that occurs, to make sure that we aren't just paying for future attorney bills?
Oh, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you,
That's
but
okay.
I thought that was one of the things that when there's a compensation resolution, that was a clause that was always included, that this was final.
It relieves us, but I'm talking about going against the manufacturer. And if it does go against the manufacturer and the manufacturer ends up being at fault, shouldn't the state be reimbursed for the cost that it has spent on this? Because if he decides to take this court action against the manufacturer of the chair and the manufacturer is deemed to be at fault and he receives a judgment, should we as a state receive our money back? Because what we're saying here is we're taking the claim, correct?
I see your line of thinking, but I think what Mr. Cawley was thinking is that if you pay his medical bills and then the state wants to sue the chair company and get their money back, that's fine with him. They've got more lawyers and more money than he does.
Well, I don't mean the state. I mean, does he take action against the manufacturer later?
He keeps saying he has no intention of doing that.
I'm just curious, should there be some language that if he does decide to take action and they rule that it is the manufacturer's fault, the reason that he fell and was injured, and the manufacturer has to agree to pay him anything, shouldn't there be some language in here that allows us to receive our money back? Because if it's the manufacturer's fault, then it's not the state's fault.
Right, and I have no problem with that, and I don't think Mr. Cawley would either.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair Lady House.
Always in the.
$500 to go after to get the money from the chair company, and it doesn't seem like he's trying to dig us when you think about $7,500, and he did what the people at the Labor Department told him to do. Not everybody knows that you go through a different process. A lot of people are trusting of the person that's in charge, and apparently these people were in charge at the Labor Department, and he trusts them that they were an authority, and he just did what they told him to. In fact, I don't think $7,500 is outlandish for some hospital bills, I say. I've seen a lot worse things.
Representative Chokas.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the lady on the platform, have you got a copy of those medical records?
I do, right here.
And have you totaled them up?
I have.
Okay.
They're less than 7,500.
They're less than 7,500? How much are they?
They're right at, did you? Yeah. 446. But there were 4,500 that were what were approved by the Claims Committee. In the time frame from when the Claims Committee has approved it to now, there have been late charges and penalties and interest applied because he couldn't pay the bills. So the compromise amount was $7,500. There were also some bills from a chiropractor that they did not approve of, and that's not been, that was, he has the documentation where he went there, but they did not cover the cost of that doctor.
Yes, ma'am. One further question. What assurances do we have that if he receives this compensation that he's going to apply that money to those bills?
I don't know that we ever have any assurance of anybody using the money we give them in these situations as they are directed.
So in other words, we're going to give him a check for $7,500, the way you're describing this, and that he could file bankruptcy and not pay those claims and walk away with $7,500, and he's got $4,500 worth of bills plus some late fees that you don't have the amount of.
I really don't think it would work that way, but I don't know how to explain it any different.
Would you be opposed to language that requires him to put that money towards those medical bills?
Has that been done before?
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the Minority Leader Abrams.
Thank you. Ms. Buckner.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it not true that this is a nominal sum to compensate a person who was harmed on our premises, and that if we fail to move on this action, he will have possibly a cause of action not only against the manufacturing company, but against the people at the Department of Labor, which could far exceed $7,500 simply in the legal fees the state would face in order to push back on this issue, and that it's $500 is a fairly reasonable sum for a nominal set of issues. And in terms of the compensation resolutions that have come through this body during my 6 years, this is one of the lowest numbers we've ever seen, and it solves a number of problems without putting the state in any harm.
Thank you for the question. That's how I see it.
Chairman Willard.
Thank you, but is it also true, Representative, that Georgia has what we call the Georgia Tort Claims Act, which applies to the state of Georgia and all its agencies, where anyone who has injuries resulting from negligence on the part of the state, whether it be the Highway Department, the Labor Department, Department of Family and Children's Services, has a procedure to go through the Georgia Claims Act to present their claim for a proper adjudication. Is that not true?
To my understanding, that is true.
And I'm asking, why are we circumventing that process under this particular claim?
We went before the Claims Committee.
Not the Claims Committee, ma'am. There's a Georgia Tort Claims Act where people can pursue claims administratively against the state.
I went through the process that I thought I was supposed to go through, is all I can tell you. I followed the instructions that I got from Legislative Council.
We're circumventing, Mr. Chairman, I believe, what is a appropriate procedure set up under law for anyone who has a claim contending they have been tortuously injured by the state.
All right, I'm going to take one more question. We're running out of time, and that'll be the Majority Whip, Representative Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Buckner, is it not true that while the Representative Wendell Willard is correct in terms of the procedures to be followed, $7,500 is, in fact, a very reasonable settlement of this matter as compared to what would ultimately be charged to the state should he file suit against the state. Given the amount of attorney's fees and given the amount of bills he has, he could easily reach $20,000 to $25,000, if not more.
I believe that to be true.
Recognize Chairman Reinders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Given the fact that on page 2 it says services shall be in full and complete satisfaction with all claims against the state, I don't see how the state can get out of it for any less than $7,500. I make the motion to pass.
Second.
I have a motion and many seconds to do pass. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. No. The ayes carry it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
The next resolution we have is House Resolution 1160. Representative Hughley, Minority Whip.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I bring for your consideration House Resolution 1160. Today I stand before you on behalf of a gentleman by the name of Lathan Word. And on the day of September the 9th, 1999, at the age of 18, 6 days before reporting for the Marine Corps, Mr. Word was wrongfully incarcerated and falsely charged with felony charges, armed robbery, and possession of a firearm. He stayed in jail for a year before his court date, and after a year he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He served 11 years, 9 months, and 6 days in the Georgia Correctional Facilities before his conviction was overturned, and he was released on June 20th, 2011. Mr. Word is now approaching 31, and he finds himself a free man with no skills, no job experiences, and a criminal record that has yet to be expunged. Nearly 12 years of this young man's life was taken away from him because of a false eyewitness testimony. The long and the short of the story is he was charged with robbing a mom and pop convenience store on the corner by a person who was working the first day on the job. There were no cameras. There were no other witnesses. There was no evidence in the court except the store clerk said that this is the man who robbed the store. As a matter of fact, the clerk said that he came in with a bag over his head and the bag blew up and he saw that it was him. But he did not identify Mr. Word at the time the robbery was reported to police. He identified Mr. Word after the police brought him back to the police station a couple of days later. Mr. Word spent 12 years trying to prove his innocence. And in the meantime, he was being victimized by a cruel prison environment, knowing every day in his mind that he was innocent, as he walked the same cement floors with real murderers, thieves, and rapists. And while incarcerated, Mr. Word was stabbed 6 times after an altercation with a fellow inmate. His father died, his grandfather died, and he was bitten by a recluse brown spider. He could have lost his life there, all because one man decided to lie. Mr. Word remained unyielding, and he fought to the end, and he maintained his innocence every step of the way. And even after the Court of Appeals found that he had inadequate representation by his court-appointed attorney and overturned his conviction, the DA's office said, well, we will let you go if you plead guilty with time served. And this young man said, no, I will not, because I am innocent. And he went through trial again, and when they brought his accuser in, the accuser said, I can no longer continue with the lie. And he was released from prison. And I speak to you as a mother today because my son is 29 years old. And when I think about the things that my son has done between 18 and 29, this is the time of our lives when we accomplish so much. We go to college, we start our careers, many of us start our families during this time. And this man, instead of learning how to be one of the few, the proud, and the brave, was learning life as an incarcerated individual. He was deprived of his dignity, he was deprived of his rights, but he maintained his innocence. And this young man has proved to us that you can survive with dignity, and he never yielded, and he never gave up, and he never pled guilty to something that he did not do. And as you can see in the resolution, we're only asking for $400,000, $100,000 up front, and $300,000 in an annuity to be paid out over 20 years. And let me leave you with this. Proverbs 17 and 15 says to us, acquitting the guilty and condemning the innocent, the Lord detests them both. And I ask for your favorable consideration of H.R. 1160, and I'll yield for any questions that anyone may have at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Representative Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Hughley, is truly a tragedy what's happened to Mr. Word. And in the resolution, in lines 11 and 12, it's my understanding that the victim had not been truthful, and later, this apparently subsequently testified that Mr. Word was not the person who robbed the victim. Is that right?
That's right.
Then Mr. Word was he went through a jury trial and was convicted. Is that correct?
Mr. Word went through a jury trial the first time, and based on the testimony of the store clerk, he was convicted. The second time, after the conviction was overturned, he requested to go to trial again rather than plead guilty. And in the second trial, by this time, the store clerk was a prisoner himself. And he came to court and said he could no longer continue the lie, and that he had not been truthful at the time Mr. Word was convicted. That's what happened.
Was Mr. Word represented by counsel?
He was represented by our public defenders.
Okay. And was there any prosecutorial misconduct that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of any, but the Court of Appeals overturned it for inadequate representation of his counsel.
Was there, in the conduct of the state in prosecuting this case, was there a problem with something that a state employee did? Was there any issue of wrongdoing by a state employee?
Such as?
Any prosecutor misconduct or hiding or keeping the evidence of Mr. Word's innocence out of the courtroom? Anything like that?
I'm not aware of any. I'm not aware of anything other than the fact that they brought him to trial, and I read the court document, and I'm not a lawyer, but I sat and read through the court documents, and as they were going through the court documents, they had no evidence other than this person saying that he was the one. And of course, he did not identify him until after the police brought him down to the police station several days later and kept questioning him, and that's when he identified Mr. Word as the person. So maybe is that the misconduct you're looking for?
Well, I'm just looking for. I'd just like to know who or what was done by or on behalf of the state that was inappropriate in the prosecution of this matter.
Let me just tell you this, that the Court of Appeals said that what we did needed to go back because he did not have proper representation of counsel. The public defender's office is who represented him. The public defender's office is the state, so if there's an error, then there was an error in that representation.
Well, was he convicted in Muskogee County?
He was.
And can you just let me know how much Muskogee County is contributing to this, his benefit for the wrongful prosecution or wrongful conviction?
Well, as you know, when it went to the court, it was not Muskogee County against Mr. Word. It was the state of Georgia against Mr. Word. And he was prosecuted by the district attorney's office, and it was the state of Georgia against Mr. Word, not Muskogee County against Mr. Word.
Well, was it a jury in Muskogee County made up of citizens of Muskogee County that
They're citizens of Muskogee County, but they're also citizens of the state. This was the state of Georgia. This action was the state of Georgia. The state of Georgia is the one who took away his liberty and held him for nearly 12 years.
No further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Martin.
Mr. Chairman, to Representative Hughley, my question, I think you probably answered part of it, was is the state going to take action against the gentleman that perjured himself during the first trial?
He's already in prison.
I understand that. When I pressed my button, I didn't know that the current witness was in the penitentiary for another crime.
Right.
So that was my question, is because I guess Representative Weldon, I have the same question. It appears that the gentleman was convicted because an eyewitness lied. I'm not sure the prosecutor nor the judge nor anyone on the jury could have done anything to change that outcome if one has an eyewitness. So I just wanted to see if there wouldn't be some recourse against the gentleman that testified in error.
Well, I don't know if he can get any recourse out of someone who's incarcerated, but the fact still remains that this is our system of justice. And when the state of Georgia acts on behalf of the citizens of this state, and he has gone properly through the courts of this state, and the courts have said that we are in error, and we have a responsibility to this young man to help him put his life back on track. And $400,000 is a very small amount when you're talking about taking away prime time. Prime time for a man is between 18 and 30 is prime time for most men. I would think you all would agree. That's prime time.
Okay. I got it. Chairman Earhart's got his feelings hurt now. Majority Cost Chair Sheldon. Inadvertent. It'd be Representative Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Hughley. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm on.
You are.
Okay. Representative Hughley, $400,000 amounts really for 15 years in jail, not to mention that he didn't have the right to serve his country and he was stabbed, and all the horrors that he incurred in the prison system really amounts to $26,000 a year. Is that not true?
Yes, the amount is a nominal amount, and you know, everybody has their own ideas about that. One of the things that I wish we would do as a state is come up with a way where we can treat everyone the same. We need to have a compensation standard whereby when these things happen, because no system is perfect. And what happened is we went through our system of justice that we trust, and if we're going to keep our system of justice, when something happens that's wrong, we have to own it and we have to make it right. And so as a state, we need to have a committee, Mr. Chair, I would suggest, whereby we can come up with a standard so that we can treat everyone the same when this happens. If you will recall, over the years when we've had compensation resolutions, every resolution has a different number. But we should value all of our citizens the same.
Okay, no further questions. I would ask for a motion. Have a motion in several seconds. All in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Ayes have it. I will now turn the chair over to Chairman Earhart, and I will reluctantly go to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What?
Calvin's got a question.
Representative Smiley, hold on.
You mentioned that with 3. I had the third one, but I just wanted to mention that although I went before the Claims Commission, and I think the committee ought to know this. I've been on this committee for 30 years now, and I never had a compensation resolution. And so I went and read the law, and there's a 24-month statutory clause in there, and the commission was kind enough to still allow him to present his case, but because of the statutory limitation, it could not be heard, and that's why the third one was not here. So for those of y'all who may have one, there is a 24-month statutory clause in there, and I think once I looked at his case and saw all the various obstacles that he went through various attorneys, etc., it was a very difficult case for him, but he was exonerated, and although he spent several years in prison, he was found not to have committed the crime, but spent several years, but he could not get anything because of the limit of statutory had expired. So I think 24 months is something I think legislatively we ought to kind of look at, because that a person that's been wrongfully, if 5 years is the statutory for several offenses, I think that a person that's been offended should be able to have a longer time than 24 months. So I just throw that out just for informational purposes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Smiley.
Thank you.
Recognize Chairman of the Appropriations Committee, Chairman England.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We're going to run through this fairly quickly. We've taken considerably more time on those two than I thought we would. And with that, I'm going to dispense on the thank yous to everyone until we get to the floor. And also, I had those thank yous typed into my electronic device in the teleprompter, and it just completely lost everything a few minutes ago. So anyway, the 13 fiscal year budget in front of you, it recognizes an increase that was proposed by the governor of a little over 5% in total funds, or about $928 million. And while this is positive affirmation that we are recovering slowly, it should be understood that this growth does not begin to regain all the lost ground from our high water mark in fiscal year 2008, when we had over $2 billion more in revenue and 500,000 less people than we are appropriating for today. In fact, the 13 budget proposes state appropriations or state operations at over 20% less per capita than we were operating at a decade ago. In brief, the growth is revenue from the state's agencies' fees, and most revenues remain static otherwise. The primary drivers of the increases are income tax at $486 million, sales tax at $263 million, corporate income tax at $61.6 million, and then fees and interest that are fairly flat across the board. The rainy day fund, or RSR balance, is standing at $328 million, which is an increase of 183% over 2010, carrying on the tradition that this House and the Senate and General Assembly have had in trying to rebuild those reserves. Expenditures by policy area are holding about the same as in the past. Education is at 54.5%, health at 22.5%, public safety at 8.5%. The health area alone absorbs 3% more of the funds in 13 than it did in 12, and education, by virtue of those changes, declines about 3.3%. Debt actually consumes about 0.5% less, and safety consumes just a little bit more. Debt is being held in check at 6%, and the state employee positions authorized count has been reduced by 549 positions, or over 0.5%. There are 9 common statewide changes in FY13, of which the adds of $46 million are to the state health benefit plan and $155 million to the retirement system are the most significant. There are $824 million in new dollars in FY13. In round figures, that money is absorbed through these next items: SHBP at $46 million, retirement at $154.9, K-12 enrollment growth $114.5, higher ed enrollment growth at $93.1 million, DCH at $204.5 million, behavioral health at $37.5 million, prisons at $35.2 million, leaving about $138.3 million for discretionary and innovative initiatives such as reading mentors, accountability court expansion, and refurbishing of the One Georgia Economic Development Funds. Reductions are still prevalent, but the roughly $130 million in cuts are targeted much more across the board, which would indicate also that we're slowly moving out of this stage of decline. Your House subcommittees chose to follow the governor's lead and focus on the essentials. You will see that we have also concentrated our efforts on the initiatives supporting and creating jobs, such as the 3-year implementation of market salary increases for certain law enforcement officers in the state that total to about $4 million. In the health arena, we have not only funded benefits by expanding independent care waivers by 50 slots, but have expanded the governor's original proposal to cultivate health care providers by expanding opportunities for residencies and resources for physicians to practice in our state. Per the directive of this House, we've also established the Georgia Vocational Rehab Agency using existing funds, but this singular entity will have greater visibility and advocacy than it ever has, being a division of a bigger department. This may be the most straightforward budget that we've produced in quite some time. We play no political games, but simply try to enhance the distribution of funds with the most up-to-date information on hand. So we're going to run through the document very quickly in front of you, and I'll call out by section number. My document differs from yours just a little bit because it's got my notes contained in it. And we'll start, if you would, at section 1, dealing with Georgia Senate. They've asked that we allow them to make the changes and reductions there, so we're allowing that. Section 2 in Georgia House, you'll see the reflections and the common changes. Many of those items that I'd mentioned, state health benefit plan, ERS, workers' comp, unemployment, and then general liability. All of those changes will be rolled up to the top of each agency, and so I won't go through that each time. On 2.1.1, you'll see a 2% reduction in the House operating. Section 3, 3.1.1, also a 2% reduction in General Assembly joint offices operating. And then under audits and accounts, section 4.3.1, you'll see the add of $20,000 for the Immigration Enforcement Review Board, and this is just annualizing a portion of what we had put in the amended budget also, so that's moving forward as well. On section 5, Court of Appeals, we've done a few changes there on 5.1.2 through 5.1.5, and those are addressed above in the statewide changes. You'll also notice a language change of 5.1.9, converting the Court of Appeals over to PeopleSoft statewide system effective of January 1 of 2013. That should create a significant savings. Moving on to section 6, the accountability courts. Of course, you've heard the governor speak of the accountability courts that we're putting into place, and what we're doing here, what Chairman Powell and his subcommittee did was move this money from the accountability courts over into the other pot of money, and we'll talk about it just in a few minutes, leaving a director and 2 project managers, and then the funds needed to support an annual conference there. On Judicial Council 6.4.1, reduction there. And there's actually a system already being used, so there's no need to duplicate that. They'll be encouraged to use the system that's already on hand. And then 6.4.3, Family Law Information Center Pilot Project, or FLIC as some have known it as, that deals with domestic issues with low-income families in Fannin, Pickens, Gilmer counties in the Appalachian Circuit. Moving on, no changes in Section 7 of Juvenile Courts. Section 8, prosecuting attorneys. Dealing with district attorneys on 8.2.1, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4. You're seeing some changes there, and these are some additions there that are associated with requisite positions on the 2.4, dealing with 2 new judgeships. The others deal with a program that was picked up by the counties last year, and we're not having any fund anymore. So those are explaining that. And then you'll see some slight changes also in 8.3.1, 8.3.3, and 8.3.4, and just some cuts there that Chairman Powell felt like were needed, stuff that was not ready to roll yet, and then some other things that were just not necessary to refill yet. Section 9, Superior Courts. See a small cut there, or just not agreeing to the governor's ad there, to use the Institute for Continuing Judicial Education is what we're asking them to do there instead of coming up with another training regiment. Under 9.3.4, again, using ICJE 9.3.5, that is allowing for the 2 new judgeships. 9.3.6 is taking a small ad there for senior judges, and these will also be used in accountability courts. A small deduction on 9.3.7, just kind of pairing up or balancing up some things there. And then 9.3.8 is some additional senior judges for the regular senior judge status, where they may have a death penalty case or something like that that needs help, where a circuit needs help. Moving on to Section 11, which is your next changes. On State Office or State Accounting Office 11.1.1, we reduced that cut by $100,000, which will allow part of that contract to remain, and that's basically staff people that we send to that course on accounting. And then on 11.1.2, it's basically the position is being transferred, but there are no funds to go with it. It's just the responsibility being transferred over there from Office of the Insurance Commissioner. On Section 12, DOAS, under 12.9.1, 12.9.2, you'll see the 2 compensation resolutions we just voted on there. 12.10.3, the tax court on House Bill 100 that will be coming, that you'll see soon. A small ad there of $326,000, and that will help operate that tax court. Moving forward into Section 13. As we got into the budget and the governor's office got to looking at some of the initial recommendations they had made, they decided that some of the fits that they were putting over from labor into Department of Ag were not going to be good fits there, so decided to move some of those over to insurance. And on 13.2.1, you will see where that's being taken out of Ag, and you'll see it show up again in insurance in a little bit. 13.3.3, reduction of $51,000 for not needing as much space in one of the buildings over there at the Department of Ag. 13.4.5 is $100,000 in marketing reduction, dealing with the Belgian international contract we dealt with partially in the amended budget. 13.4.6 deals with House Bill 87 passed last year, again setting up and helping to allow the Department of Ag to go out and help our producers across the state navigate and learn and understand H-1B and H-2A guest worker programs. Section 14, 14.3.3, you'll see a cut of $46,000. This was part of a 2% reduction request that was submitted to OPB but wasn't taken by the governor, so the committee went back and took that small cut. Moving on to Section 15, and what I want to draw your attention to real quickly here, as the federal government is looking at realigning their budget and starting to make some cuts there, some of those cuts are going to be affecting us pretty heavily, and one of those cuts has already come down dealing with supplemental TANF, and so you'll see some reductions throughout the budget where it's federal funds, and some of those things that we felt like and the committee felt like were important to the citizens of this state, and so they've tried to refill some of those holes that were left by the TANF money going away. And so what you're seeing on 15.1.3 and 15.1.4 are part of that to take care of those. And 15.1.4 4 is $802,165. What we've tried to do is just find every little scrap we could to help with that. 15.2.5, I do want to point out that the committee agreed to with the governor on providing the 150 additional waiver slots for comp waivers and now waivers. So just wanted to let you know that we have tried to grow the slot numbers in those two particular programs. 15.2.10, another cut there, but that money is being used to help with the replacement of supplemental TANF. 15.2.1, and it's just asking them to annualize some costs there. And that program there helps high school kids with developmental disabilities transition into adulthood, and it just restates our fiscal year 12 directive there. Small add at 15.2.12 of $100,000 for the Emory Autism Center. That organization had been running on reserves for several years. They're out of reserves, so they've come to us. It's something we've funded in the past and just felt like it was something that was worthwhile. That kind of handles the folks with autism that are out of school, particularly senior adults. So trying to help those folks. 15.4.9 is a reduction of $500,000 just based on the surplus in 2011. Then you'll see a small add at 15.4.10 on an Opening Doors to Recovery project, and that is a research project on high-risk adults with mental health programs. And then on 15.4.11, just a intent language to ensure those options of availability are given priority. 15.7.1, under Child and Adolescent Developmental Disabilities, you'll see an ad there of $250,000, which gets a one-to-one match there with the Marcus Autism Center, and that gets 100 more kids off the waiting list there. 15.10.1 is just another restating of our directive from fiscal year 12, and then a 2% cut on 15.10.2 to the departmental administration of $717,000. Section 16. $16.33, deepening that cut a little bit and telling them to go ahead and replace some more of that with other funds, just saving us a little bit of state cash. Under 16.11.1, elimination of the contract for Appalachian Community Enterprise of $25,000. 16.12.1, this is going to the payments to GFA. That go on then to the Georgia Rural Water Association. Instead of doing a $5,600 cut, we're doing a $15 add. They're going to be utilized a good deal more as we continue in the water wars with Alabama and Florida. And then you'll see a small add there on one Georgia at 16.4.1. Moving on to community health, section 17. On 17.1.2, we're just delaying the evaluation of the new reimbursement methodology in light of the Medicaid redesign discussions. It's just we felt that that was a little bit premature to be putting that in at this point. 17.1.3, that deals again with ICD-10, which is a standard that was published in January of 2009, setting a new compliance date of February 16th of this year. And what we're doing is adding the money there for the billing and other needs. 17.1.5, you'll see there some funds, additional funds for audits of inappropriate utilization of Medicaid services. That small add will gain us back over $2 million, and that will be reflected here in just a second. 17.2.6, AHEC, small add there to allow expanded housing support for the medical students. Chairman Parrish and his committee have done a lot of work on trying to figure out how to keep docs that are going to school here in Georgia to get them to stay in Georgia. We know that somewhere north of 90% of those doctors that receive their education in Georgia and do their residencies in Georgia settle somewhere within about 50 miles of the area in which they do their residency. So we're just trying to do some stuff there to help make that happen. 17.2.7, Two of the federally qualified community health centers. This is something we've been doing now for several years. We provide 1-year funding, then the feds pick it up after that. Then 1728, Southeastern Firefighters Burn Foundation, is something we've been doing in the past. Over the last couple of years to help us out, they'd been operating off reserves. Well, now they're out of reserves, and this just helps victims' families that have been through some type of traumatic fire experience. Under 1753, you'll see a change there. That's moving. The governor had already moved it to the 2009 cost report for nursing homes. We're moving it one more step further to the 2010 cost report to accurately reflect the true cost. This also signifies the match that the nursing home providers have been paying in to that to help draw down additional federal dollars. This actually caps them out now, so they're at their maximum. 1756, and it's just we're going back in and capturing some inappropriate utilization there. And then when you look at 1759, another problem that we've been seeing statewide deals with single dose drug vials, where the vial may, just for an example, be a 5 cc vial. Well, that 5 cc's may treat someone that is 250 pounds, but if they use it on someone that's 100 pounds and only use 2 cc's, the other 3 cc's get thrown away. Well, the doctors in the office cannot charge for that they throw away, but they're having to buy that full bottle. What is happening is that a lot of these drugs that fall into this category are ones that are direly needed. So what winds up happening, those physicians, instead of taking that loss themselves, they put those patients in the hospital because the hospital gets full reimbursement for it. So this is one of those items, while we spend a little here, the backdoor savings will be fairly great, and we'll just have to try to figure out how to capture those in the coming years. It applies right now to 147 different drugs. 17.510. You see a small ad there of 810,000. There are currently 130 people on that waiting list. This will address 38% of those. And then recognizing some federal funds on 17.511. Looking on to 17.69, there is a anticipated FY12 reserves. We're capturing those, and just based on anticipated actual need or usage. So we're just grabbing that cash for now. And then you see a recognition of some additional federal funds on 17.610. 17.86, I just wanted to point out a fairly large item, one that I mentioned at the very beginning, just where we're in agreement with the governor on SHBP and the employer funding piece there. Looking at 17.9.2, we're adding there a position for someone that's an analyst to work with statistical, say that 3 times fast, analysis of physician and physician-assisted workforce in Georgia, and to help better compile responses to some of the surveys that are being done there. 17.10.2, we did not agree with that transfer. That transfer of that $1.4 million from Morehouse would severely endanger that medical program over there. 17.10.3 is an ongoing residency program that we've been working with Houston Medical Center on to provide some resident slots there. And then 17.10.4, $853,000 add. This goes again toward helping to secure as many residents in state as we can. The 5-hospital consortium down in southwest Georgia has about 142 positions plus 18 family medicine positions already existing. The first 21 of those 160 total will go into programs in July of 2014, but it takes a 3-year ramp up to get there. This helps do that. Those 5 hospitals put together about $2 million in cash, and so this just goes to kind of match that and help get that program in gear and going. It's something that's ready to roll now. 17.11.1, just restoration of 2% cut there. 17.11.2 on Mercer. Fulfilling part of the obligation the General Assembly made several years ago when Mercer expanded to Savannah. We've not been able to fulfill that obligation for the last several years, so we're trying to make a good faith effort at least tackling part of that. 17.12.1 and 17.12.2, again, restorations there. of some of the cuts that were taken at Morehouse, trying to, again, take care of our in-state medical schools. In 1741, one last little change there, restores a 2% cut that affects Mercer, Morehouse, and Emory undergraduate residency capitation. Moving on to Section 18.9.1. Just again, agreeing with the governor's add there of $35 million, and that provides full funding for Milledgeville and Jenkins prisons, and they'll be up and going by early fiscal year 2013. Moving on to Section 19, Department of Defense, one small add there, 19.2.1. Deals with an interstate compact dealing with military children, school children. As the BRAC closures continue, Fort Benning and several of our military installations here have been gaining positions, and this is just a compact that allows for transfers of credit from one state school system to another and helps with several other pieces there. Under Section 20, Department of Driver Services, 20.2.2, small reduction there of less than 0.5% of that license issuance. It's actually about a 0.3% reduction, 147,693. Shouldn't see any decline in service. Everything should be fine with that. Section 21, under decal, 21.1.2, reducing operating expenses by $7,500. It's in telecom and contracts there, same reduction we did in the amended budget. On 21.3.3, the governor had increased the salaries for teachers to 170 days, but had omitted part of the operating money for the centers, so we're trying to true that piece up. As of the end of last year, there were 82,608 actual students in pre-K, so still funding at 84,000 slots covers more than what are actually being used. 21.3.4 and 21.3.5 are some reductions there for things that are not being used and accounting for going from 86,000 slots down to 84,000 slots. Section 22, Economic Development. Section 22.2.4, Departmental Administration, Marketing, cut of 100,000 there. 22.3.1, we deepened that cut there, another 25,000 from the governor's recommendation. 22.4.1, Council for the Arts, did a 2% reduction, 11.5 or 11,500. I'm sorry. And then 22.5.3 deals with opening or providing for 2 new project managers and operating expenses in a new China office. That's going to be in the Qingdao province. I mean, you know, that ain't bad for country boy when it's spelled Q-U-I-N-G-D-A-O. So anyway, but we're making a concerted effort. Of course, the governor is definitely making a concerted effort to try to bring businesses back to the United States, and this is part of that effort. Caterpillar, of course, is one that you've seen recently. We're excited about the possibilities of several others. I'm excited about the day at some point we might get to go to a store and buy a lot of stuff or most everything there that doesn't have Made in China stamped on it. So that's part of what that initiative deals with. On tourism, under 22.9, Chairman Burns and Representative Chokas both came to us about the visitor centers in Sylvania and in Plains. And what we've done there is put back a good bit of the operating money, and those communities are heavily invested in those two. The one at Sylvania is actually the oldest operating, Butch, help me out if I get this wrong, the oldest operating welcome center in the United States, continuously operating welcome center in the United States, has that designation. We just didn't see that as something, that we saw that as something as pride and that didn't need to be closed and walked away from. Elimination of the contract, 22.9.4 on the Historic Chattahoochee Commission. Lessening the cut on 22.9.5 on the Georgia Historical Society. Lessening the cut there on 22.96 Georgia Humanities. Then a deeper reduction in funds for marketing on 22.9.7 and a reduction in operating expenses on 9.8. And then a reduction of the cut to the Georgia Medical Center Authority. That's kind of our biosciences incubator down at Augusta. And it's one of those things now that we're just kind of starting to break the crust on that particular industry here in the state of Georgia. It's something we didn't feel like we needed to walk away from and hang out a sign saying we're not interested. Section 23, education. Folks, I'm going through this as fast as I can. 23.1.1, lessen the cut there to 1% on ag ed. Central office, 22.2.3. Extended the amended fiscal year 12 cut of $33,000. 23.2.4 is no new funds. This is actually, well, it is new funds. It's money that the governor had put in school nursing, but we're recommending through the Education Finance Commission that there be a coordinator on the state level. So that 120 just moves out of that program over to there to do that job now. That leaves somewhere between 29 and 30 million in central office at DOE, which is down considerably from what it was. I guess when Pro Tem Jones was chairing the subcommittee and the majority whip also, as we were well north of $40 million at one point in that particular area. Pushes a lot of the money back out to where the kids get touched by it. 23.3.3, redirecting the $40,000 in remaining planning grants there to fund 2 consultants to work with charter schools. 23.4.1, reducing the cut to 0 there for the communities and schools, the local affiliates. 23.9.1 GYSTC, eliminating that cut. 23.10.2 under Governor's Honors, lowering that from about a 2% cut to about a 1% cut. 23.11.1, that was a cut that was taken, and quite honestly, as we looked into it, there were not funds there to cut, so we've eliminated that reduction. 23.12.1, dealing with RTCs and sparsity grants, Georgia Special Needs Scholarships. We restored the money for the residential treatment centers there. In a lot of ways, those are state schools that are operated by private entities, but those students, if they were in the general population, would be great distractions to the general population of students. So we've restored some of that. 23.13.1, under school nutrition, the governor had proposed moving school nutrition, nursing, and transportation all into QBE to allow for greater flexibility. However, after studying this, Chairman Dix and his committee and several of us had talked and just didn't feel like moving the nutrition piece was something that would be prudent to do. 23.13.2 is a deduction in the school lunch program. Lowered that cut to 2.3% cut. And then 23.13.3 is just recognizing the $550 in federal receipts there. 23.14.1, preschool handicap, that is a true up of actual enrollment. 23.16.1, there was a tax calculation error in Troup County, and we've been working with them trying to true that piece back up. Not exactly sure where that number's going to land, but for now, we put in $429,550. Probably be something that we'll have to address in the amended budget when we come back next year. 23.18.3, again, that shows where those 3 programs were rolled into QBE. It shows where we've taken everything but transportation out of that. It still moves about $127.7 million over. On 23.18.5, that is the differentiated pay that we agreed to do for math and science teachers a few years ago. So that ad there, or not an ad, it's just an agreement with the governor's position there. On 23.18.6, just truing up some numbers there. 23.18.7 is a language ad, and that's reflecting where the governor had proposed to remove the funding for the charter system grants. Under RESAs on 23.19.1, what the committee did there was go back and restore the reduction to core services. School nurses, you'll see 23.21.1, that's a portion of the Education Finance Commission recommendations. And then 23.21.2 is where we did not recognize the move into QBE. 23-22-1, dealing with severely emotionally disturbed. We're just recognizing the actual declining enrollment there is 4.3% decline. State schools, 23-24-2, taking care of training and experience for the school for the blind, the 2 schools for the deaf. Technology and career education, 23-25-1, lowering that cut from 3% to 1%. And then 23-26-2 is dealing with AP exams for free and reduced lunch students, just covering the budget shortfall in that particular category. Moving on to Section 24 under ERS, 24.4.2 and 24.4.3, providing for House Bill 250 and House Bill 542 as required to do by the actuary. It's actually little to no cost, so you don't see a monetary sum there. You just see us recognizing the language of allowing that to happen. 25.2.1 under Forestry Commission. We're just telling them to reduce the reduce funds but maintain the position count there. This will deal with the urban and community forestry assistance there. Governor's Emergency Fund on Section 26, 26.1.1. A reduction from what we're going to need for the Unemployment Trust Fund interest payment, renegotiated rate there on interest, not going to be as high as what we thought it was, so we were able to go back in and lower that just a little bit. Under 26.3.2 is providing for new contracts with Carl Vincent Institute on fiscal notes. Chairman Chanel wanted to make sure that I mentioned that and pointed out to him where that was, so a $200,000 add there. And then under Governor's Office of Consumer Protection, 26.95 is annualizing reduction in customer service. It's just carrying forward from the amended budget. In Section 27 under Human Services, you'll see several transfers out of, several transfers that were put in there, recognize it as a blended agency with DHS with Voc Rehab coming over. We've pulled those back out and added them here at the end. We'll show you that in a minute. You're dealing with sections or lines 27.3.1, 27.10.3, 27.11.1, 27.20.1, 27.23.1, 27.26.1, and they all move to Section 27.29. The child care licensing, you can see some small changes there. Those are housekeeping swaps, and also move the out-of-care home piece to a 58.2 penetration rate. 27.7.3, just a small language item, telling them to investigate alternative standardized reporting mechanisms for defects across the state. Chairman Dempsey, or Chair Lady Dempsey, excuse me, has a grave concern, as does her committee, that if something were to happen with one of the defects workers before they could get back to the office, that the paperwork on that particular case might be lost, or it could cause a problem if something were to happen with that caseworker. Something similar is being thought about to what police departments across the state use, State Patrol, those different agencies, kind of a car-based type system. 27.13.2, again, just a language authorizing use of these funds also to be available to behavioral health clients. 27.21.2 and 27.21.3, again, just a housekeeping item and dealing with child care licensing to maximize Title 4E funding. 27.24.2 is looking on the relocation of some of the DFACS offices, just saying that we agree to that. 27.27.1 and 27.27.2, eliminating those reductions. Those would have basically put Council on Aging out of business. Then 27.29 is the new Georgia Vocational Rehab Agency being attached to the Department of Human Services. And so that piece, along with some contracts that we restored from an 8% reduction to a 2% reduction, deal with agencies that touch just about every community across this state, so such as Easter Seals and other well-established long-term partners that we've been working with. Office of Insurance Commissioner, 28.1.1. Again, that's dealing with the comptroller. It's not actually a position being transferred. It's just a delegation of duty, so there's nothing to move there. Dollar-wise, 28.3.1 fire safety. That's a move from labor. 28.5.3. Last year, the commissioner had asked us to put in $600,000 for fraud investigation to get a unit up and started. That the insurance companies are now funding that, and so we've just taken that back out of the base. There's what we've done. Section 29, dealing with forensic scientific services, 29.3.1. And looking there, we added about another $200,000 to provide for all 27 scientists affected by the expiration of the grant. Then the $1,045,000 is part of that pay parity issue that we've been talking GBI and actually DNR about, and we'll see some stuff about DNR here in a few minutes. 29.4.2. That is actually transferring into that program out of 29.5.3 of some positions there, dealing with Sexual Offender Review Board. And then 29.5.2 is the conversion of 2 part-time evaluators to one clerk to full-time employees, an add of $100,000 there. Then on 29.6.1, you'll see a little bit of a difference there. That was the money that I was telling you about earlier. And the $10 million original there was that the governor had put there for the accountability courts. We moved that 2.2 from back up in the front a few minutes ago from the Judicial Council, less the AOC and senior court judges' cost to implement the program. So you see that 1.6 add there. The others spread in those other aforementioned categories. Juvenile justice, under Section 30.1.2, again agreeing with the governor there to provide those 50 non-secure residential beds, and that they're going to be at the Savannah River Challenge program. Section 30, one other thing I want to mention there, 30.4.5, 30.4.6. 4.5 provides operating expenses for the new Atlanta YDC. We agreed there. And then 30.4.6 is the 2 security management response teams or SMART teams to deal with YDC problems. We've agreed with them there and think those are good adds. Moving on through, just trying to cover the changes here. Section 33, DNR. Under environmental protection, line 33.3.1. Reserve funds were previously used for those positions, and they're exhausted, so we've went in and made the field there to take care of those positions. The problem there is those positions go unfilled. That means building permits get held up, and any economic development could possibly grind to a halt or are severely slow here in the state, so we want to make sure that gets taken care of. 33.5.2. That reduction there, we softened that reduction, about half of that. It was a non-mandated program, but it's one of high value to the state. We thought it important, the committee thought it important to restore a portion of that. 33.6.3, again, the pay parity issue dealing with DNR rangers. 33.9.1, again, going back to what we did in amended FY12, is just hold the filled positions, but go ahead and eliminate the unfilled positions. 33.9.4, again, the pay parity issue there. Section 34, pardons and paroles. Did a small reduction under 33.3.1. All of those are not going to be ready and up and running July 1 of 2012. They're going to be kind of staggered in or phased in over the year, so able to save a little bit of cash there, and we took that. Moving on to Section 36, public defenders. 36.2.3, 2 additional assistant public defenders is $53,000 add. Section 37.1.4 is replacing some of the TANF funds we'd mentioned earlier. 37.8.3 is another partial restoration of some of the TANF funds that have disappeared. 37.11.1 deals with your county health departments, and then under the new formula, just trying to do a hold harmless there of $2.5 million. And then a small reduction of $45,000, annualizing the 2% cut from the amended budget under vital records at 37.12.1. Department of Public Safety, 38.5.2. Chairman and his committee felt that with fuel prices continuing to increase the way they are for State Patrol and every agency especially, but especially the State Patrol, I should say, that they wanted to add another $200,000 in fuel there on top of what the governor had already done. 38.6.1, there's a slight correction there just to correct an error in the transfer from the Public Service Commission to the department. 38.9.1, a reduction there, encouraging them to go to an all-electronic testing procedure. 38.11.2, a request there to backfill some of the funding cuts they got there at Post. We only did half of the reduction because the budget restrictions continue on to this day. 38.12.5, that deals with the North Central Cobb Police Academy, and it's a partnership with the Public Safety Training Center. Did a small reduction in that contract, and the director down there and the sheriff up in Cobb are working to try to make that as self-sufficient as possible within this next year. Moving on to Section 40, Regents. Section 40.1.4, adding 4 crop scientists specializing in horticulture, peanuts, soybeans, and peaches. These are 4 positions that have lapsed over the last several years. We have some new emerging pest and disease problems, and the lack of continuing research in the state. We'll need to get on top of this. Again, ag is, of course, our leading industry in the state. We want to make sure that we stay on the cutting edge of that. 40.4.2 and 40.4.3, you'll see those changes there. It's a change that OPB and Regents both requested. That'll show back up on 40.17.2. 40.11.1 deals with Medical College of Georgia. That's just restoring that 2% reduction that was taken there. 40.13.3 and then 40.13.4 are 2 adds that we agreed with there. One of them deals with graduate medical and graduate nursing education. The other one deals with trying to elevate the Georgia Health Sciences University to the 2nd nationally recognized cancer institute in the state. So trying to make sure that we at least have 2 of those in the state. 40.14.6 dealing with SREB. Those are actually some SREB dues, but they go toward some funding for some residency slots also. So that's just a small add there. And then on 40.17.2 is where you pick back up those 2 moves from earlier, 40.4.2 and 40.4.3. And again, that was asked for by OPB and Regents. 40.17.10, a small add of $25,000 for Southern Legislative Conference. Their Center for Advanced Leadership Skills, or CALS. Some of you may have been through the program. They're hosting it this year. They're not allowed to go out to outside vendors to get funding for that, and this is just a small help with them. It's going to cost them a good deal more than that to do it, but they have been gracious enough to host it. And I think Chairman Dixon is a graduate of that program this past year or the year before? Year before. But I think several folks have gone through that. I'd encourage you to if you haven't. 40.21.5, that's digital textbook initiative is what the add back is. We're coming up on the next reprinting of the Georgia history textbooks. This add here of $500,000 saves us $4.5 million, is about what it will cost to print those next textbooks. Those will be digitized and be available in every classroom across the state, and may even be available for you to view via the internet at some point in the future. For those of you my age, you remember taking Georgia history, there was a green textbook Ms. McCullers did. That's what that deals with. Department of Revenue, 41.1.3, we're eliminating the courtesy postage page envelopes. That was offered as part of the 2% reduction but wasn't taken, so we did. 41.2.5 is reduction in personal services and maintain the current vacancy rate. That was also offered as a 2% reduction, not taken, but we did. And then forest land protection grants 41.3.1. That's just a reduction to meet what the actual need is there. 41.8.6 under Department of Revenue is dealing with the county printers and the gratis printing system. It's where your county tax officers or county tax commissioners use those printers. They're printers that we bought for them several years ago. And what this does is tell the Department of Revenue to use existing funds and do a 3-year rotation or a 3-year program on replacement there. 41.10.3, another reduction there. We're expecting a savings of $600,000 total. There was only $140,000 taken. There was already a reduction made, but this just takes and goes ahead and captures the rest of that $600,000 savings from a prior year. Section 42, Secretary of State, under Archives and Records, 42.1.1. We believe that the archives down in Clayton County is vital to Georgians, and we've done what we could to help add an additional half day of opening time there. 42.5.2 is the Georgia Pharmacy Board exams. I think that deals with formularies. And then 42.5.3 is revising a computer survey and making it mandatory so we can kind of track and understand a little bit better about where our nursing students are going. 42.9.2, and that you'll see a small upgrade there for the commission's website upgrade for the Ethics Commission, $250,000. 42.9.3 and 42.9.4 are language adds, telling them to use up to $2,800 in existing funds for local training, and then also utilize existing funds for data programming. Part of that original request for the data programmer, the last employee was there at about $90,000. The commission should be able to do that within existing funds because that person is no longer there. 43 under Soil and Water Conservation. See the elimination of the reductions taken there under 43.2 and 43.3. Again, those are essential positions in dealing with the water wars. Section 44, this is State Personnel Administration's last hurrah. That agency is being dissolved and lowers our human resource costs throughout the state government. You may have noticed in the amended version, and there are places within this document where we've had substantial savings from that agency going away. Section 45, 45.1.1, the Excel program. Taking the book and fees money out of Excel. Excel remains the only program that receives both. Even the Zell Miller scholars don't get fees and books. So we're just bringing that down to make it in line with what our best and brightest are getting there. 45.11.1, increase in the North Georgia military scholarships to projected need, $91,000. And then North Georgia ROTC grants on 45.12.1, again for projected need. Technical college, no changes. Teacher retirement, no changes. DOT, airport aid, 48.1.1, elimination of that reduction. And then on 48.1.2, elimination of that reduction and a $45,000 add. There is a new federal match rate, which is lower, so we've tried to accommodate that and plan for that. On 48.2.1 and 48.2.2, those are transfers only, and they go over to construction admin on 48.4.1. and you'll see that down there at 48.4.1, $50 million total. That money is rolled into that. And then 48.7.1 is LMIG grants. Those are what used to be known as LARP, or Local Assistance Road Paving Projects. That's stuff that touches every county and every city in the state also. Veteran Services, we left alone. Workers' Comp Board, we left alone. And at the back are your bonds. And, Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll be glad to try to answer any questions. Sorry it's taken so long. I know that we're an hour past when we were supposed to be back on the floor, but I'll be glad to take a few questions and then ask for the committee's consideration.
Thank you, Chairman England. Give you a second to catch your breath and have a drink of water, and we'll start just a couple questions so far. They're starting to add up. First question is Representative Weldon. Pushed your button? He waves. Next question is Representative Gardner. She waves. We'll try you, Minority Leader Abrams. Did you push your button? Okay.
I'm trying to find my page. It's the Department of Personnel, State Personnel. Those 17 positions that are eliminated, are those being moved to somewhere else, or are they total elimination of those employees?
I do believe most of those are being eliminated as part of that 594 positions I mentioned in the beginning. I imagine some of those are probably moving to other departments where they could be placed, but part of the goal and part of the savings that's going to be realized from eliminating that agency would require that there would be reduction in personnel.
And then one final question on page 24, line 15.0.5, the $1.3 million adjustment in unemployment insurance premiums. Can you explain that?
That's one of those rolling changes, and those are based on actual need.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I don't see any more questions. I'll entertain a motion. Representative Dixon moved to pass. Many seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. It's on to the Rules Committee.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.